Hi, I'm Phil Melia. I'm a corporate tax partner in RSM's Cambridge office, and I also lead on tax for our national life sciences sector group. Welcome to our video series for life science businesses. We're going to explore some key issues through this series, and today we're talking about R&D tax credits. So I'm joined by Max Stanyard. Max, do you want to give yourself a bit of an introduction?
Hi Phil, yes of course. So I'm a manager in our innovation relief team in London. I joined RSM as a pharmacology graduate in 2016 and I've been working exclusively on R&D tax credit claims for the last 3 years, specialising in life sciences clients.
Brilliant. So the man to talk to today, and I guess this year we've had unprecedented change in R&D, haven't we? So what's going on? How's it impacting life science businesses? I guess starting with the changes that we've seen from August this year.
You're absolutely right. There's been huge changes in the last 12 months and probably the biggest overhaul that we've seen since the inception of the regime. The major area that's impacting our life sciences clients is the additional information form, the new R&D portal by which all R&D claims now need to be submitted. So previously within the life sciences sector, there was a proclivity to produce brief technical narratives but produced by in-house staff or maybe even no technical narratives. And that was due to a not unfounded view that as a highly R&D intensive industry, little justification was required for the technical activities. The additional information form is very prescriptive and it's going to increase the burden on claimants to produce high quality technical information to support their R&D claims going forward.
And I guess what are we seeing in terms of the challenge for that? I mean, obviously it's changed, but what's the challenge?
There's several challenges inherent in that, just the volume of supporting documentation that's required, but also some of the intricacies of how that information needs to be prepared. So one key issue that we're seeing in life sciences is how do you define a single project? Can a whole program of work be defined as a single project, or does within that program of work are there different streams of technology that need to be discussed separately? That's going to impact the amount of technical information that companies need to submit. It's also going to be impacted by other areas such as the cap on relief that can be claimed on a single project. So it's a really nuanced area of subjective judgment for claimants that a lot of our clients are struggling with at the moment.
And I guess one of the things I've seen is just about the data that's available. If you've got a scientist who's been doing R&D for years and you've pretty much included all of his time in the claim, suddenly you've got to say, well, okay, how do we split his time between the various projects? And that's going to depend on what their role is. Sometimes it might be easy, sometimes it might be quite difficult to actually split those. So yeah, lots to come through on that on that change. What about the rates? They've changed as well, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely, quite significantly as well. So obviously rate changes are going to be significant because they're applied across the board, and particularly in the context of life sciences clients, they're quite R&D intensive, and obviously there's large costs associated with those that R&D. So the headline is that it's good news for large companies but bad news for SMEs, with the RDEC rate increasing but the SME super deduction and credit rates decreasing. They're major swings these. So as I say, good news for large companies.
And for, I guess, life science businesses that are loss-making, not quite as bad a news, is that fair to say?
No, exactly. So there is some new provision within the legislation for R&D intensive, quote unquote, entities. So that is essentially entities that are spending 40% of their total expenditure on eligible R&D expenditure. So those entities will still have access to the old rate of 14.5%. So that's a material difference to the new rate of 10%. So it's well worth investigating.
And I think, I'm not going to test you on the maths, but the simple rule of thumb that I've always had, it used to be if I spend, £100, then I'm going to get cash back if I'm an SME R&D tax credit claimant of 33 point something. That's basically gone down to 27 and point something, I think it's 27.5. So it's still, it's not great. It's gone down, but it's not as bad as we first thought. What about things like there's the change to where R&D is done, particularly where it is done internationally? What's happening there?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be significant. It's not coming until April 2024 now, but it is going to be significant at that point. So the government are essentially looking to drive UK innovation and investment by stipulating that all third-party costs need to be onshored from April 2024 to still maintain that R&D tax benefit. The hope being that claimants are going to change their behaviour and undertake more work in the UK. The major area that we see in life sciences in terms of third-party outsourcing overseas is clinical trials. So these will no longer be eligible if they're undertaken overseas. There is one exception to this rule that's worth mentioning. So in very specific circumstances, some third-party costs might remain eligible if the conditions for that work to be undertaken aren't present in the UK. So for example, if you have a clinical trial that needs to be undertaken overseas because a particular demographic or cohort isn't present in the UK, that's one that we've seen, that might remain eligible, but that is open to interpretation, and it represents another area of nuance and judgment for claimants.
So quite a few things coming down the line. Dare I ask anything else?
There's a few things worth mentioning, yes. So another thing that was mentioned in the spring budget is the pre-notification form. So that essentially requires that any claimant that is claiming for the first time or for the first time in 3 years needs to pre-notify HMRC of their intention to claim. That needs to be done within 6 months of the end of the accounting period for which they're claiming. So a lot of companies might not be aware of this, as it's not in line with any other corporate tax or reporting deadline. And that's obviously going to be highly relevant for any startups or spin-out companies, which is obviously quite prevalent within the life sciences sector.
So that's 4 things that we've just touched on, and I'm sure there's more. I mean, from your perspective, what's the key takeaway?
The key takeaway is that there are significant wholesale and complex changes within the R&D regime, and that claimants need to be talking to a specialist advisor, at least at first, to make sure that they're aligned with the new regulatory environment. The other thing to bear in mind is that these changes, wholesale and complex as they are being brought in at a time when the regime is under specific HMRC scrutiny. We've seen increased inquiry rates and an increase in the percentage of claims that are deemed to include errors. Since the 8th of August, we've actually seen that 50% of all claims have been rejected by HMRC on the grounds of non-compliance. So that stat alone should tell you we would really urge any claimant to seek specialist advice before submitting an R&D claim at the moment.
And I guess that's a good place to leave it. RSM are one of those specialist advisors, and we're supporting life science businesses right across their growth. So if you've heard something today that piques your interest, contact me, contact Max, or have a look on our website, use the links there, and hopefully we can help you. And we look forward to interacting with you in the future. So thanks very much, Max.
Thanks, Phil.